Okay, so this is a podcast about ecological pyramids, and this is the SWABAT that you should be able to interpret how energy flows between trophic levels of an ecosystem for food chains, food webs, pyramids of energy, pyramids of biomass, and pyramids of number. So I'm going to go ahead and put check marks to things that we've already talked about that you should already know. So you should be able to interpret how energy flows in a food chain and a food web. And this podcast is going to review what you've done in class on Pogles and clarify a few points on pyramids of energy, pyramids of biomass, and pyramid of numbers. But let me just add one qualifier here, that we call these things pyramids, but if you guys think back to geometry class, you know that sometimes these aren't drawn as pyramids. Sometimes they're drawn as simply triangles. So you should know the difference between a triangle and a pyramid. But really, they should be interpreted as a pyramid. And I hope you figure out how to spell interpreted. I just kind of had a brain fart there. So as a pyramid, which means that you need to think about it in three-dimensional shape. So even though we're looking at one side of the pyramid, know that that pyramid moves back in space as well and represents something that way. Okay, so let's talk about first the pyramid of energy, which if you refer back to your Poggle, I'm going to scroll down here. So your reference materials that you already have, let's look. Your reference materials that you already have notes of come from Poggle. The Poggle on that's titled Ecological Pyramids and Model 1 is the pyramid of energy. And that's what we're going to talk about first. The pyramid of energy. That's my abbreviation for energy. And really, I'm not going to give you a whole lot of details. You've already got a model in your... I'm not going to put a lot of details on my model here. This is my best attempt at digitally drawing a triangle. That's not too bad. And what we know is that there are several layers or levels to the pyramid. And what we understand is that energy flows up the pyramid or triangle in my drawing. It flows up. You need to make sure that you are concerned about units. And in the units that we used in the Poggle, we used kilocalories, which is actually the same as calories with a capital C. And this is really what you see on food, on labels for food, is kilocalories, even though we just call it calories. But kilo means 1,000. So when we say something has 20 calories, what we see that on a label, we're actually saying that it has 20,000 calories, but that's a different unit than what we're used to talking about when we talk about our food. So anyways, calories is a measurement of energy. Without going into too much detail, that's what you need to know. So calories is a unit of energy, and in your Poggle you see you had to label levels as producers and consumers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, and as these organisms move up a food chain, which is what we're talking about here, you see that the base or the width of the triangle changes because a lot of energy doesn't make its way up to the next level. So interestingly, a lot of the energy is lost at each level to the atmosphere, and it's lost in the form of heat. And heat is a byproduct of a process that we're going to learn about in the future called cellular respiration. Now, you learned about this in middle school, but this is just a little bit of a review. This is that process that makes the energy that we need to function, and it's in the form of a molecule called ATP, which we'll talk about more in the future, but it's not 100% efficient. Just like electricity getting to your light bulb is not 100% efficient, we lose a lot of the electricity along the way from the power plant to your home. In the same way, not all this energy that we are trying to make gets turned into ATP, and some of it gets turned into heat, and we lose that to the atmosphere, or we use that energy to survive. There's a question about that in the POGL as well. So naming some of the processes that organisms go through and use energy to survive. So it's not all that energy moves its way up. And you actually had real data to calculate. So what you found was that somewhere around 10% of energy moves up a trophic level. So about 90% of it gets lost. Now this is my about. That looks like an equal. This means about, or approximately. Yeah, so that's the pyramid of energy. That's what you need to understand as we move forward. So that's the pyramid of energy. Let's talk a little bit about the pyramid of. I'm going to scroll up here. Of biomass. The pyramid of biomass. Sorry, let's do pyramid of numbers first. And so this is, I'm gonna use a different color here. This is POGL on ecological pyramids, model 2. Excuse me. This is the pyramid of numbers. Now there are two pyramids that this activity gave you, and they're representing two different things. And I hope you recognize that one of these is a better representation of the other. But when we're talking about numbers, usually what that's referring to is the number of individuals in a specific area. And I guess I should say number of individuals in a certain population. So if we were looking at that strict definition, you'd see that pyramid A actually makes more sense. Except that when we talk about the caterpillars, they're not eating a whole tree, they're only eating the leaves. So what we need to do then is count the leaves. So you see pyramid 2. Now as you look at this pyramid, as you look at the pyramid, it doesn't look like a triangle per se. I guess it looks more like a Mayan or Aztec, Incan actually, kind of thing. Pyramid, that's what I mean by kind of thing. Okay, so we've got something like this, and we see that as we move up, this is the same food chain that we've been following in the previous pyramid. The number of individuals, if we're looking, this actually is leaves, oak leaves, decreases as we go up because things higher up need more energy to survive because they're only getting 10% of that energy. So they need to be able to consume more organisms. So we can't support more individuals at higher trophic levels. Again, it's because that one hawk that's here at the top needs to be able to consume more prey, more individuals of prey to support it because it's not getting all of the energy from each prey. It's only getting 10% of the energy from each prey. So it needs to be able to eat more individuals, okay? So that's essentially what's going on with pyramid of numbers, and I hope that makes sense to you. So going down to the pyramid of biomass, which may be an even better indicator than pyramid of numbers, because as you know, some populations have individuals that are bigger than others. If we're talking about insects versus birds, well, they're different sizes, so we need to account for that. So this is in the same POGL. This is model 3, the pyramid of biomass. And when we talk about biomass, the POGL defines this as the dry mass, the grams of dry mass per area. And so the unit that we're talking about here is grams per meter squared. So how many grams, how much mass, or how many grams does each population weigh, or have rather, for each square meter? So that way we can kind of standardize the units. And as you can see, there are two pyramids, Pyramid X and Pyramid Y. If you look at Pyramid X, you still see that's a terrible line. You still see the same kind of structure as the previous model. It gets smaller and smaller as we move up the pyramid. It gets smaller and smaller, and this is for the same reason, because mass can be converted to energy. I think you've probably seen this formula before. E is energy, M is mass, C is the speed of light. So we know that there's a relationship between energy and mass, and so we know that a lot of the energy gets lost to the atmosphere, and a lot of the matter that we eat gets converted to energy. That's the food that we eat. We eat nutrients. When nutrients are matter, we convert that into energy and then lose some of that energy as heat, or you burn up some of that energy to survive. So as we move up a system, because we've lost some of that energy as heat at each level, there's less biomass in the higher trophic levels. Except for when we're looking at Pyramid Y, when we have the phytoplankton and zooplankton, perch and heron, which is a new food web that we haven't seen before, we see that there are less biomass for phytoplankton than zooplankton per square meter, which is really interesting to think about. And the reason that I hope you figured out in the POGL was that the phytoplankton actually reproduce very, very quickly. So even though they get consumed by the zooplankton, they reproduce fast enough to be able to continue this food web and serve as the producer for this food web. And interesting, if we think about this, phytoplankton have a limiting factor. Phytoplankton, as producers, do photosynthesis, so they need a certain amount of light. Well, they can only make so much of themselves based on how much light they're able to expose themselves to or get to do photosynthesis. But they're able to reproduce so fast and so plentifully that they're supporting more and more zooplankton, which then from zooplankton onto heron, you see the same kind of trend of getting smaller as we move up the food web. Okay? And I hope that makes sense to you. I just jotted a couple notes here, but I was really talking about the POGL, so I hope you had that in front of you. Know that you're going to have an individual assessment when you come back to class. So make sure you understand this material inside and out, and you can connect it to the content that we had talked about earlier in previous classes. So let's go back up to the learning target and make sure you can do these things. So now you should be able to talk about or interpret how energy flows between trophic levels in the pyramid of energy, pyramid of biomass, and pyramid of numbers. Know that these pyramids show similar trends, but they're showing different data, which indicate different things about the ecosystem. Okay? And I think that wraps it up.